In 1945, the world rejoiced as World War II finally came to an end, leaving behind a trail of devastation, but also a sense of hope for a brighter future. And with the war's conclusion, Korea was liberated from decades of oppressive Japanese rule, a period marked by hardship and cultural suppression. But instead of the unified freedom and independence that the Korean people yearned for, the peninsula was tragically split in two, a decision that would have profound and lasting consequences. Soviets took control in the north while Americans established their presence in the south. This division occurred along the arbitrary 38th parallel, a line drawn seemingly without regard for the Korean people or their history. This artificial division tore through families and villages, creating deep wounds that would take generations to heal. It was a decision that set the stage for future conflict, a tragic prelude to the Korean War. In the north, Kim Il-sung, a Soviet-backed guerrilla leader, emerged as a dominant figure. He quickly consolidated power, establishing a communist regime. He promised sweeping land reforms and a new egalitarian future for all. This message resonated deeply, gaining support from many hopeful Koreans who had long suffered under foreign rule and economic hardship. In 1948, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea, was officially born. Kim Il-sung was appointed as its first premier, solidifying his position as the supreme leader. He introduced the ideology of Juche, or self-reliance. This philosophy of self-sufficiency and independence became the nation's guiding principle, shaping its policies and its identity. The state exerted control over all aspects of life. The individual was expected to serve the state, prioritizing collective goals over personal aspirations. Land was redistributed to poor farmers, a move designed to address historical inequalities. This reform significantly boosted Kim's popularity among the rural population. However, political rivals were systematically purged. Kim's control became absolute, paving the way for a totalitarian regime. Meanwhile, tensions with the South continued to escalate, fueled by ideological differences and mutual distrust. Both sides vehemently claimed to represent the legitimate government of all of Korea, further exacerbating the divide. The division hardened into a seemingly permanent state, and with each passing day, war loomed ever larger on the horizon, threatening to engulf the entire peninsula. North Korea's foundation was built on a complex mix of control, ideology, and the promise of a new beginning for its people. But tragically, the seeds of a devastating conflict had already been sown in the divided land. The Korean peninsula was now a powder keg, filled with tension and ready to ignite at any moment. On June 25, 1950, North Korean troops invaded the South, launching the Korean War. Backed by Soviet support, the North's advance was swift. Seoul fell in days. The United Nations, led by the US, intervened, turning the tide with a daring landing at Incheon. UN forces pushed deep into the north, but China intervened, driving them back. The war devolved into a brutal stalemate, devastating cities and killing millions. In 1953, an armistice created the demilitarized zone, but no peace treaty was signed. Korea remained divided, its people traumatized and its land scarred. North Korea emerged devastated, its infrastructure in ruins. The war left a legacy of insecurity and suspicion that shaped North Korea's worldview. The DMZ became one of the world's most fortified borders. The conflict cemented the division of the peninsula. The scars of war would define North Korea for generations. The world watched, wary of what would come next. The Korean War's shadow still looms over the peninsula. After the devastating Korean War, Kim Il-sung was faced with the monumental challenge of rebuilding a shattered nation, a land scarred by conflict and loss. The task ahead was immense, requiring not only physical reconstruction but also the forging of a new national identity. With crucial aid flowing in from the Soviet Union and China, he strategically focused on developing heavy industry and achieving economic self-sufficiency, aiming to create a strong, independent nation. This was a period of intense industrial construction and development. Juche, the ideology of self-reliance, was put into action. North Korea increasingly isolated itself from the global community, carefully limiting foreign influence to protect and cultivate its unique socialist experiment, shielding it from perceived external threats and ideological contamination. Military strength became paramount to the nation's identity. The Songun, or military-first policy, took firm root, prioritizing the armed forces above all else. The entire society was deeply militarized, with every citizen prepared to defend the nation. Consequently, the army received top priority in resource allocation and national planning. Kim's cult of personality grew exponentially. His image, teachings, and ideology came to dominate every single aspect of daily life, permeating all levels of society. Grand statues, ubiquitous portraits, and carefully rewritten history books glorified him as the great leader, the eternal president. Any form of dissent was swiftly and brutally crushed. Loyalty to the regime was rigorously enforced through pervasive fear and constant surveillance. Kim's word was absolute law, and his control over the nation was total and unquestioned. The state demanded absolute and unwavering obedience from every citizen. North Korea transformed into a heavily fortified fortress state, effectively closed off from the outside world by formidable barriers. The deep scars of the Korean War served to justify the regime's pervasive paranoia and relentless militarization. Kim Il-sung's overarching vision was one of complete isolation, unwavering strength, and absolute control over every facet of life. The very foundations of the modern North Korean state were firmly set in place during this era. The world watched as a nation turned resolutely inward, fiercely determined to survive and prosper strictly on its own terms, regardless of external pressures. Daily life in North Korea was tightly controlled by the state. Jobs, housing, and food were assigned, but rations were often scarce. The Songbun system classified citizens by family loyalty, shaping their entire lives. Privileges or discrimination depended on one's Songbun status. Fear and surveillance kept dissent in check. Political prison camps punished even minor offenses. Collective punishment meant entire families could suffer for one person's actions. Most people focused on survival, keeping their thoughts to themselves. Internationally, North Korea's actions fueled its rogue reputation. Incidents like the USS Pueblo capture and the DMZ axe murder crisis heightened tensions with the US. The regime's defiance isolated it further. The world watched North Korea with growing alarm. Control, fear, and conflict defined the era. The regime's grip on power was unyielding. Kim Il-sung's death in 1994 sent shockwaves through North Korea. The great leader was gone, leaving a void in the nation's carefully constructed identity. His son, Kim Jong-il, inherited a nation teetering on the brink of crisis. The weight of expectation and the challenges ahead were immense. The collapse of Soviet aid, a crucial lifeline for the North Korean economy, and a devastating famine, known as the Arduous March, descended upon the country, pushing it to its absolute limits. This period brought immense suffering to the North Korean people. Millions died from starvation and disease. The scale of the tragedy was almost incomprehensible. To survive, people were forced to eat grass and bark, desperately searching for anything to stave off hunger. And black markets emerged as vital lifelines, offering a glimmer of hope in the face of widespread despair. The famine starkly exposed the failures of Juche, the state's ideology of self-reliance. But instead of addressing the systemic issues, Kim Jong-il doubled down, pressing on with his nuclear ambitions. In 2006, North Korea conducted its first nuclear test, a watershed moment that signaled a dangerous escalation. This act drew global condemnation and triggered harsh sanctions from the international community. Kim Jong-il argued that nuclear weapons were essential for the regime's survival, a deterrent against perceived threats. This defiant stance further isolated the country on the world stage. His leadership style was characterized by reclusiveness and secrecy, shrouded in mystery and limited public appearances. But the Songun, or military-first policy, continued to be the guiding principle of the regime. The military remained the most powerful institution in the country, receiving the lion's share of resources, even as ordinary people starved and struggled to survive under increasingly dire conditions. Kim's rule was marked by defiance of international norms and an iron grip on power through tight control. Scarce resources were consistently diverted to weapons development, neglecting the basic welfare of the population. As a result, international pressure continued to mount on the isolated regime. But the regime stubbornly resisted any meaningful reform or opening to the outside world. The elaborate cult of personality surrounding the Kim family endured, reinforcing their absolute authority. And any form of dissent or opposition was swiftly and brutally crushed by the state's security apparatus. Under Kim Jong-il, North Korea became even more isolated from the international community than ever before. The world watched as a nation prioritized regime survival above all else, even at the expense of its own people. Kim Jong-il's legacy is a complex and troubling one, marked by hardship, extreme secrecy, and a dangerous game of nuclear brinkmanship. Kim Jong-il's death in 2011 brought his young son Kim Jong-un to power. Despite his youth and inexperience, Kim Jong-un quickly consolidated control, purging rivals, even executing his own uncle. He built his own cult of personality, appearing frequently in public to project strength. Kim announced the Byungjin policy, simultaneous economic development and nuclear advancement. North Korea ramped up nuclear and missile tests, escalating tensions worldwide. Sanctions tightened, but Kim pressed on. Some economic changes emerged. Markets called Jangmadang grew, and small businesses appeared. Pyongyang saw new construction and modernization, but rural hardship persisted. The regime's grip remained ironclad. Kim surrounded himself with loyalists and promoted a new generation of officials. The world watched as North Korea's nuclear capabilities advanced. Kim Jong-un's rule blended old tactics with new ambitions. The dynasty's hold on power was stronger than ever. For most North Koreans, daily life is a struggle for survival. Food shortages are constant, many rely on private gardens and black markets. Prices are high, and the public distribution system rarely meets needs. Family and community ties offer support, but hardship is everywhere. Some risk everything to escape, facing danger and severe punishment if caught. Defectors' stories reveal oppression, resilience, and the courage of those left behind. Criticizing the regime or accessing foreign media can mean prison or worse. Fear and suspicion permeate society. Neighbors are encouraged to report on each other. Yet small acts of hope persist. Love, celebrations, and secret glimpses of foreign culture. South Korean dramas and K-pop circulate underground, sparking curiosity and dreams of change. These acts of defiance are risky but show the enduring human spirit. Trust is rare, but people find ways to connect and survive. The longing for freedom remains strong. The outside world is a distant hope, but not forgotten. North Koreans endure, hoping for a better future. Kim Jong-un surprised the world with high-profile summits, meeting South Korea's president and US President Trump. Hopes for peace and denuclearization soared, but talks soon stalled. North Korea demanded sanctions relief. The US wanted concrete disarmament steps. With no compromise, missile tests resumed and tensions returned. The COVID-19 pandemic deepened North Korea's isolation. Borders closed, trade with China plummeted, and shortages worsened. Information about the true impact is scarce, but suffering likely increased. Human rights abuses remain widespread. Torture, forced labor, and executions persist. The regime denies all accusations, calling them foreign smears. International pressure has little effect. The government's grip is unbroken. The world's hopes for change have faded. North Korea remains sealed off, its people largely unseen. The regime's survival takes precedence over reform. The plight of ordinary North Koreans continues to draw global concern. In 2025, North Korea remains a land of contradictions, militarized, isolated, and secretive. Nuclear weapons and self-reliance are still top priorities. Food insecurity and economic strain persist under sanctions and closed borders. The regime's control is absolute, information is tightly restricted. Unofficial markets are lifelines, but fear stifles dissent. Closer ties with China and Russia help North Korea withstand Western pressure. Diplomatic prospects with the US and South Korea are dim. The Kim dynasty's rule has lasted over 75 years, marked by power and isolation. The future is uncertain. Will reforms come, or will the status quo endure? The world watches, hoping for a day when North Koreans can live in freedom and peace.